All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Period and Cycling Masterclass. I am so excited that you're here. This is going to be a really great masterclass. There's a lot of good information that I'm going to be giving you all today, and I'm so excited to dive in because, I feel like before medical school, before seeing patients where I'm working on their period and helping them with some of the symptoms that they get around their period, I even didn't know a lot of these things, and I feel like it was a very big pattern in the practice and in the patients that I see, that many people don't know much about their period other than the fact that it's supposed to be 28 days and that you get your period every month and that's it. And so there's really a lot of information around your period that can be really helpful for you in trying to plan for pregnancy or trying to prevent pregnancy, or even just give you some more information about what's going on with your body and what's normal and what's not. So I put together this masterclass to help give you a little bit better of an idea of what's supposed to be going on and to answer some of those questions that we never really were really taught in our health classes in middle school or high school that we really should have been given as women in that really important period of our time. So of like growing up and being teenagers. So in this masterclass, we're going to talk a lot about all things menstruation. We're going to talk about why we get our period, what a period actually is supposed to be like, the 4 different phases of our cycle, and what hormones are actually involved, and what symptoms can come up when those hormones are a little bit wonky and out of balance. This right here is just a little overview of what our cycle goes through each month. So we have the hormone levels, and we're going to go more in depth in this, and I'm going to show you this again in a few slides, and we're going to go over every single hormone that's listed here. So our hormones fluctuate throughout the month, and we have different phases of our cycle. So we have our follicular phase right here, where our follicles are developing, where an egg is going to come out of it later in the ovulatory phase. And then we have our luteal phase, which is later in the cycle, that really increases your progesterone levels, and it has its own actions as well. And so right here, you can see that your progesterone levels peak around day 19 and day 21, and that's because this right here, which is called the corpus luteum, that we'll go into later, releases progesterone to help build up your endometrial lining in your uterus. And then just a little fun fact is that when your ovary leaves this, or your egg leaves this little follicle and leaves your ovary, at the time of ovulation, you may notice a little like mild twinge or a mild pain around where your ovary is supposed to be in your pelvis. And that's something that's normal, and it's called Mittelschmerz. And I just think that's a really fun fact that not everybody experiences this, but sometimes people will notice this little pain around ovulation halfway through their cycle, their monthly cycle. And yeah, it's pretty interesting that you can feel that release of the egg from the ovary. And then we have our different phases of our cycle. So there's 4 main phases of our cycle. And so we have our menstrual phase, which is day 1 through 7, so of our period of our cycle. And so that's the days that you're going to be bleeding. And day 1 is going to be the first heaviest day of your period. And so that's the shedding of the uterine lining that was built up during that luteal phase right here at the end of the cycle. And then your period, we're going to talk about what's normal, but your period, this should last about at most 7 days. And then this is more of like known as the winter phase of our cycles. And then we have our follicular phase, which is more of the spring type of our cycles, and our where we're feeling like we're ready to take on everything, and we've kind of come out of that winter phase where we want to just snuggle up on the couch, and we're ready to do some spring cleaning and be very productive. And so this phase is generally around 7 to 21 days. It's the proliferative phase, where the uterine lining starts to thicken up again, estrogen starts to increase, and then we also are building up those follicles right here that help to release our egg in ovulation. And so that brings us to the summer days of our period, and that is really ovulation, where we're feeling good, we're feeling we have a lot of energy, and we're feeling like flirty and sexy. And so that's really the ovulation phase of our cycle. It's when the egg is released from the ovary and we're the most fertile. And then we have our luteal phase, which lasts generally around 10 to 16 days. And this is the movement of the egg through the fallopian tube. And then at that time, where I pointed out before that progesterone is really increasing at this time to help grow and thicken that endometrial lining even more. So that egg that was released, if it was fertilized, can implant into the uterus and the endometrial lining and help build a pregnancy and grow the embryo in our uterus. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the hormones involved. I've talked about a few so far, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of them. So we have estrogen that comes from 3 different places in our body. So the estrogen comes from our adrenals, it comes from our ovaries, and then it also comes from our body fat. And it is involved in so many different areas of our body. And it's involved in fertility, it's involved in menstruation, bone density, and liver function. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of these on the next slide. But the estrogen is really increasing during that follicular phase. So that this first phase right here, this is when estrogen is really starting to increase. So estrogen is this blue color right here. So it's coming up, and it's going to increase at the time of ovulation, but it's getting our body ready for the possibility of pregnancy. And so it's really helping in that whole process. And then we have progesterone, which is really responsible for building up the endometrial lining. It helps with libido. It's released by that corpus luteum. So this right here, so after the follicle releases the egg, this turns into a corpus luteum, and then this is a hormone secreting gland, and that's where all of our progesterone is coming from. And then we have our follicular stimulating hormone, which is released by a gland in our brain called the pituitary gland. And so the follicle stimulating hormone really helps to stimulate and grow the follicle that has the egg inside of it. And so that's its main job, and it's going to be the highest in the follicular phase. And then we have our luteinizing hormone, which when released, it's released in times where estrogen is at its highest. So that's going to be released when we ovulate, and then it's going to help convert that follicle into a corpus luteum, which will help prepare our body to release more progesterone and put us into that luteal phase. And then a little bit more about estrogen, because it has so much to do with everything going on in our body. Estrogen increases in our follicular phase, and the follicles are releasing estrogen. And so estrogen is really a hormone that helps make us feel sexy and flirty. And so like I said before, during our summer, our ovulatory phase, that's when our estrogen levels are the highest. And so we're going to feel like damn, I feel good. Like, I feel so sexy. And you'll find yourself flirting more, or doing some more things to increase sexual activity, because I mean, we're all human, and at the end of the day, evolution really favors continuing on the human race. So we're going to want to, our bodies and our hormones have adjusted to help us reproduce. And so it's going to put us in a state where we feel good in order to continue and create a pregnancy. So estrogen, like I said, comes from those 3 different places in our body, and it is involved in so many different functions in our body. So overall, fertility and menstruation for sure. And then it's also involved in our bone density, our liver function. It helps with the maintenance of our reproductive tissue. And many women, they notice that when their estrogen levels are getting lower, when they enter menopause, there is a bit of a change in some of their tissue in their vulvar region. And then there's some things that many people don't realize that estrogen is actually involved in. Estrogen helps improve our memory, it helps with our thinking, it helps with our mood because it's boosting serotonin, a feel-good neurotransmitter. It helps boost dopamine, which is involved in motivation and pleasure. It helps with body composition with things like water content and fat content. So estrogen actually really, really loves to store fat and has such a big influence on that. And so if you have a really high estrogen levels, you may notice that you are more prone to having more fat on that stubborn fat on your body and feel like you can never get that weight off, even though you're eating healthy, you're eating right, and you're exercising. And while a lot of different things can go into all of that, estrogen can be one of those hormones. When it is high, you're going to have some issues with weight loss. And it's also involved in water content of our body. So things like wrinkles, if you're noticing that your skin is a little bit more wrinkly, this could be, it's not a definitive factor that your estrogen is off, but it could be a contributing factor. It's one of those like weird things that people may not find an association with it, but it could be associated. And then there actually has been some information around gray hairs. The higher estrogen levels you have, the more gray hairs you actually might have on your head. So that's very interesting. And then we are going to talk about the different signs of fertility, and one of them is vaginal discharge or fertile mucus, and estrogen stimulates that as well, and we're going to get into that in a few slides. And then we have progesterone. So this is secreted by that corpus luteum, and it's a progesterone secreting gland. And so when we have more progesterone, this is really helping to build up that endometrial lining again to help allow the embryo or the fertilized egg to implant into the uterus, into the endometrial lining. But progesterone really gets you into that fall season where you're feeling like more earthy. You are trying to coordinate nesting activities. So this is the time where you want to start planning and getting things ready for the next step. And so this is really the time where you like, even when you're like pregnant, I think of it as when your progesterone is high, you're painting the baby's room, you're getting all of the baby supplies, and you're putting together the crib, and you're just decorating everything and getting everything ready for a baby. So that's what I think of when I think of progesterone in the luteal phase, and trying and noticing that it's the highest at this point. So progesterone, we've said it many times, but it's building up the estrogen lining to prep for pregnancy and implantation. And then that sudden drop in progesterone at the end of your cycle, right here, will cause the bleed. And so it's either that if you didn't have a egg implant into the lining, then the progesterone levels are going to drop and then you're going to bleed. But if you did have an implantation, the progesterone levels are going to stay high, and then that's going to help with pregnancy. And then progesterone really is important for libido. It's helpful with sleep, and it's helpful with skin elasticity as well. It also is responsible for body water content and helping with thyroid hormone production. It also prevents fat storage. So unlike estrogen, progesterone inhibits fat storage. So when you have really high levels of estrogen and low levels of progesterone, you're going to notice more of that fat storage. But when they are even and they're balancing each other out, then you'll notice that you'll be able to lose weight a little bit more, and you're not going to have as much issues with that stubborn weight. Progesterone is also really great at protecting gut tissue and helping build muscle. So at this time of your cycle, you're going to want to do more strength training and more calming exercises because because progesterone does calm the nervous system a bit, but it also helps with building muscle. So you're not going to want to be running a marathon around this time. It also is very protective to the heart, and it helps, like I said, calm the nervous system by activating GABA, which is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for calming, or that is a very calming nervous system or neurotransmitter. And then it also has, it also modulates the activity of estrogen on the nerves. Estrogen is involved in mood, thinking, and memory. And so it can be very stimulating to the nervous system. And so progesterone modulates that and helps balance that out a little bit. And then at this time of the cycle, when it's a little bit higher, you're going to feel a little bit more relaxed because of that calming sensation on the nervous system. You're going to feel hungrier, and you actually might feel a little bit sleepier. All right. And now let's dive into some different signs of fertility. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth in all of these, but a basic overview is that there's 3 different signs that you may be fertile throughout the month. And so the first one being that you may have some more discharge and mucus. So discharge is healthy from what we may experience. We may not always know. We've never really been told anything about our discharge, and I feel like I always see all the time people talking about their discharge, and they wish they knew that this was something normal, because it is supposed to happen throughout the month, and then there is a change around the time that you're ovulating, and the increase in estrogen helps to make that more of a fertile mucus instead of the other discharge that we have throughout the month. We also have our basal body temperature. And so this is the temperature of your body when you're fully at rest. And then your hormones have a big influence on your body temperature. So you'll see a big increase, or you'll see an increase in the second half of your cycle after ovulation. And I'll show you a little chart about that in a few slides. And then we also can test fertility in the position of our cervix. So the position of the cervix changes throughout the cycle, and due to estrogen levels, and it just helps to prep sperm entering into our uterus and helps to increase the chances of that egg being fertilized. Now, let's talk about cervical mucus a little bit, our healthy discharge. So this is supposed to happen, and while there is a pattern throughout the month of times where you may not have any discharge compared to the changes in the discharge for the rest of the month, it is normal to have some discharge in from your cervix. And so a normal discharge is going to look white to lightish yellow, and it may have a salty odor. So if you're noticing anything different, you may want to get that checked by your doctor, because this could be signs that there can be an infection there or something's wrong that you're going to want to investigate. Discharge generally happens throughout the month, and so you'll notice after your period, you won't have much discharge. So that's going to be the time where it's dry, and then right after that, before ovulation, it's going to be a little bit creamy, and then after that stage, you're going to go from wet and slippery. And so this is going to be about 3 to 5 days before ovulation, when estrogen is high and is stimulating that fertile mucus to help enhance the fertilization of the egg by the sperm. And so this happens because this provides a more alkaline environment. So usually our uterus and our vagina are more acidic. And so this isn't the best environment for sperm. Sperm actually can't live in an acidic environment. And so it helps decrease some of that acidity. And then it also provides some nutrients for the sperm. It filters the sperm, and it allows them to move a little bit faster. So without the cervical mucus, it could take hours for a sperm to leave the vagina, enter the cervix and the uterus, and get to a fertilized egg. But with the fertile mucus, it can take seconds in order for it to get there. And so you can think of this mucus similar to seminal fluid for men, and that is just the fluid that sperm hangs out in, and that's released in ejaculation. And so fertile mucus is it's described as feeling and looking kind of like a raw egg white. And so you'll notice that once you start looking at your cervical mucus a little bit more, you'll get to know the changes throughout the month. And every woman has mucus that may look a little bit different. So it may just take you a few months and few cycles to get to know what your mucus looks like at the time of that you're most fertile and the time of ovulation. But you'll know because it can leave a little bit more of a fluid in your underwear because there is a high water content, and it'll be a little bit sticky. And actually, when you touch it, it's supposed to be stretchy. And so you can stretch it about 1 inch before it breaks. And if you tested that creamy cervical mucus and tried to stretch it, it doesn't stretch as much as the wet and slippery fertile mucus that you get at the time around ovulation. And then you have your basal body temperature. So you check this every single morning, but as soon as you wake up. So you do this before you check your phone, before you get up to pee, before you get out of bed, before you do anything. Every morning, I like don't even open my eyes. I just close my eyes, I reach for it, I grab it, and I just put it in my mouth and turn it on to check my oh, I'm sorry, my nose is so itchy. To check my basal body temperature. And so you do this every single morning. And so you want to do this. The most accurate reading is about 6 hours after 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And so if you woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't fall back asleep for an hour or two, it may not be completely accurate, but you can still chart it and you can still track it. But this is generally what a chart should look like when you chart your basal body temperature. And you record it every single day. And during your menstrual and follicular phases, which is where this is, your temperature is going to be pretty steady. And I know it doesn't look that steady, but these are really within a tenth to 2/10 of a degree. Actually, you need it to have 2 decimal places. So you'll want it to be, I know that this chart doesn't say it, but you want it to be 36.21. Like you want to have 2 decimal places there because that will give you the most accurate reading, because these changes are so minuscule and so small that you need to have that second decimal place there. But this is going to be pretty much steady throughout the first 2 phases of your cycle. Again, your menstrual and your follicular phase. And then right before ovulation, you're going to see a drop. So you see this drop right here, and it indicates that you are actually about to ovulate. And then it will increase about 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit before, right after you ovulate, and then it will stay around that temperature until your next period, and then it will start over here again. And so one of the easiest things that I recommend to do this, there are some trackers like Daisy. And so this is a thermometer that they have their own app, and you just put the thermometer in your mouth, and the data goes right into the app, and then it gives you feedback on the thermometer right away. So I'm not entirely sure right now about the colors, but it has like a red and a green light. And so depending on the day, it'll tell you like if you're fertile or if you're not. And so it'll either shine red or green. And so it'll tell you if you're fertile. And if you've ovulated based on your temperature. And so that goes directly into your app. But personally, I use just a 2 decimal place thermometer that is for basal body temperature tracking. And then I put it into my Apple Health app where all the data is encrypted. And I say this just because everyone after Roe vs. Wade, a lot of data came out saying that period tracking apps all like may sell your information or other agencies or whatever has your information. So just so you know, for your own peace of mind, Apple Health does have encrypted data, so no one else can see what your temperature readings were and when you ovulated. And then another app you can use is Flow, which is a different period tracking app that you can enter in your temperatures as well. And so the next thing that we're going to talk about, the next marker is about cervical position. And so I'm going to go over a little bit more of anatomy first, just so we are on the same page of what we're talking about, because this one is really anatomy driven. So many of us just call everything down here the vagina, but in reality, the vagina is just this canal right here. And so we have our vaginal opening, and then the labia majora and minora, and then past the vaginal canal, we have the lower half of our uterus, which is called the cervix. And so then we have our whole uterus right here. And so the cervix can be the cervical position can be a great way to track fertility as well. And I just wanted to make sure that for this next slide, we are all on the same page of what we're looking at for cervical position. So around ovulation, your cervix will rise and it will also become softer. So this makes it easier for sperm to get into your cervix and get into the uterus to help fertilize that egg. And so it will rise, so you may not be able to touch it. So you'll know that if you're not able to reach your cervix, that has risen and you're probably about to ovulate. And then if you're able to touch it, it will be softer. And so some have described that it will feel like your lips. So if you feel your lips, that's what your cervix is supposed to actually feel like, and the times around ovulation. And this all happens, the movement of your cervix happens because of high estrogen. It stimulates the ligaments that hold your uterus in place, and it lifts it up, and it helps open up the cervical os, which is this opening right here. And then a way that you can remember it, if you're into mnemonics, it's called show. So during the time of ovulation, it's going to be soft, high, open, and wet, because we have that cervical mucus. So show, soft, high, open, and wet. And then at other times of the month, your cervix will be firm. And so if you touch the tip of your nose, that's what your cervix will feel like at the times that you are not fertile. And so it's going to be actually lower in our vaginal canal, and then it's going to be non-wet and it's going to be closed. And so one thing that before I get off track on that, so you actually may able to reach your cervix and feel it, to feel that it's lower and it's firm at this time, because it's supposed to be about 1 finger length inside of your vagina. And here is a picture description of that. So you see here at the times that you're more fertile, this is going to be higher. The vaginal canal looks longer. And then the times that you're not fertile, the vaginal canal is going to be much shorter, and you're going to be able to reach it, and it should be about 1 finger length. And so so on those more fertile days, it's going to be higher than a finger length, lower than or about a finger length on the non-fertile days, and it's going to be firmer, it's going to be closed, and it's not going to be wet. But you may have gone to the gynecologist, and they may have commented like, oh, you must have just ovulated, or you're ovulating now, you're fertile, maybe something like that. And it's because they're able to see the difference, and they're experienced in looking at the cervix and see the difference in the fertile versus non-fertile positioning of the uterus and the cervix when they're looking and doing the speculum exam. And then other signs of ovulation, we talked a little bit about Mittelschmerz, where you have that slight and mild pain or twinge in the middle of the month around ovulation. During that time, you also may notice a little bit of spotting or light bleeding. And then increase in symptoms like bloating, increase in libido because again, and estrogen makes you feel good and flirty and sexy, and then an increase in energy as well. You also have a heightened sense of vision, smell, and taste. This may not be noticeable for everybody, but if you start paying attention, you may notice some differences in that. And then breast tenderness as well. And so what does this all mean for pregnancy? So whether you're trying to get pregnant or you're trying to prevent pregnancy, using all of this information can be so useful, and you can use it to your advantage because it helps you narrow down the day that you're going to ovulate. And by knowing when you're going to ovulate, you'll know the days that you're fertile. And so you take with that what you will, do whatever you want with that information, either get it on and try to get pregnant, or use another form of protection, or just stay away from sex at those times of the month that you know that you're more fertile. And so by understanding this, you really can use that to your information. Your egg only lives for 24 hours. It only lives for the day of ovulation, but sperm can stay inside of you for 5 days. So your fertile window is really 5 days before ovulation and then the day of. So you'll want to take a few cycles in order to get to know your body and get to know when you're ovulating, because you may not be on day 14 like everybody else, or like the average. You may not be on day 15, maybe you're day 16. So you'll want to take a few months to get to know your cycles and find out what your body generally leans more towards and where that day of ovulation is for you. And then make sure that once you get all that information, you're careful on those 5 days before ovulation and then the day of. And so it can, like I said, it can take a few cycles to get the hang of putting all of this information together and getting to know your body, because these are things that we were never really taught. And if you're not familiar with it, it can be very new to you. And so it just takes some time to get to know some of these symptoms. And then why do we even have a period? Because everything in our body is done for a reason, and generally our body likes to help save energy and reuse and recycle, and it does everything for a purpose in order to help us survive in the most energy efficient way possible. And so I feel like this is a question that so many people ask. But in reality, the body makes it very challenging for an egg to implant into the endometrial lining, because to have a pregnancy as a human, it is very cost efficient, takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of nutrients. So the body wants to make sure that this is a viable embryo, that it's going to be given a good chance for survival, and that this 9 months of building up that embryo and that baby is going to be worth it, and it's going to survive. So with that said, that the shedding of the endometrial lining helps protect the mother and prevent an unviable egg from implanting into the endometrial lining. And so if that fertilized egg isn't up for the task of burrowing into the lining, then the shedding will actually get rid of that fertilized egg and help it get out of the body. And so there's actually been research that shows about 1/3 of fertilized eggs actually don't implant, and then they end up getting expelled through the body through the period anyway. So this actually happens a lot more than we know. And that's one theory or one possibility. I'm sure there's many others out there, but this is one of the reasons why us as humans or as women have periods. And what is a normal period supposed to look like? So day 1 is the first day of heavy bleeding. And so you really should be bleeding from anywhere from 2 to 7 days during that time. And your cycle should be about 21 to 35 days. And the 28-day cycle came because that's mostly the average. And so if you don't fit the perfect 28 days, that's okay. But if you're going beyond 35 days in between cycles, and or you're getting your cycles or you're getting your periods a few times per month, this is something that you're going to want to check in with your doctor and try to investigate to figure out what's going on, because you'll want your period to be within those 21 to 35 days. And this, having anything outside of that range, indicates more of a hormonal imbalance picture, and you'll want to get that investigated and reach the root cause of what is going on and why that's taking so long or taking so short of a time to get your period. And especially if you're bleeding multiple times a month, that is a lot of blood that you're going to be releasing and a lot of nutrients. And that's when iron deficiency can take place. So you'll want to get that investigated. All right, now in regards to clotting and color. So your body releases anticoagulants to help the uterine lining break down. And so it helps everything flow more easily. So if you're noticing a lot of clots in your period blood, then this can be something that you're going to want to get investigated, because it can be an indication that you're either bleeding too much, there's heavy bleeding there, and there isn't enough time for those anticoagulants to do its job, or there can be something else going on, and you'll want to figure out what that root cause is. And some clots are normal, but having anything more than a dime size and having multiple clots or a lot of clots can be an indication that there's a hormonal imbalance or an issue with anticoagulation. And then a normal color would be red to brown. So your blood turns a little bit darker as it is exposed to oxygen. So a dark red color is okay. But if you're having really light colored periods, like a pinkish color, you'll want to get that investigated. And brown can sometimes be normal, especially if it's at the beginning or the end of your period, because that's just an indication that there's some older blood there that your body is releasing from a previous period or the end of your current period. And then your flow, the amount should be about 24 to 50 milliliters. And if you have ever used a menstrual cycle or a menstrual cup, you can kind of indicate that amount a little bit easier. And so this 24 to 50 milliliters is going to be throughout those 2 to 7 days. And so, yeah, a menstrual cup actually has the amount of you can look on your menstrual cup, and I'll tell you the milliliters of blood in your that you have in the cup. But if you don't use a cup, about 10 regular tampons is 50 milliliters. So if you count the amount of tampons that you've used throughout your whole period that month, if you used regular, that's going to be about 10 tampons. And then if you used 5 super tampons, that's about 50 milliliters. And so generally, so if you're using a mix of both, just a general rule of thumb, like 10 regular tampons is going to be 5 milliliters. And then this is going to be 10 milliliters in a super tampon. So if you do a mix of both, you just add in, you just divide this by 50, and then that's the amount in each tampon, basically. And then you can just add up whatever your individual tampon use is. So, and figure out how many milliliters of blood that you are excreting each month. All right, and then symptoms of a wonky period. So it's something that has become so normalized in our society, is that periods are supposed to be painful. We are all like, whenever we get our periods, us women are all these PMS, hormone raging, crazy people. But it's like, really, we're not supposed to be like that, and it's not normal. So you'll want to get some of these symptoms investigated, especially if they, especially things like period pain, where I've had so many women ask me questions, and so many women come into my practice where they're experiencing such bad pain and cramping during their first few days of their period that they actually have to call out of work. So if you add up the amount of time that you are in pain, especially if it's multiple days throughout one period, that really 2 to 3 days every single month really almost adds up to a whole month of your life living in pain from your period. And that's not something that's normal, and that's not something that you should have to be dealing with. And there's answers, and there's ways to figure out what's going on, and dive deeper in that. And then if you're spotting throughout your period, if you notice that you're spotting at the time of ovulation, obviously that can be normal. But if you're spotting at any other times during your cycle, that's something that you're going to want to investigate. And then any irregular cycles. So if you notice 1 month your cycle was 28 days, and then the next was 33 days, and then you're back to 20 days, and then you're at 45 days. So if you're back and forth or missing cycles and your periods are never regular, that's something that you're going to want to investigate as well. And then really heavy periods is something that will want to be investigated too, because there's so many different root causes to what could be going on there, including high estrogen levels, low progesterone levels. It also can be a sign of iron deficiency, which is crazy because when you're iron deficient, you need more of that iron-rich blood, but then your body is getting rid of blood, so you become more anemic, and then it just becomes this constant cycle. And then actually another area of, or another root cause of heavy periods could be a vitamin A deficiency. So vitamin A deficiency and iron deficiency can actually really mimic each other, and they can come hand in hand. So you will want to investigate the root cause of those heavy periods. And then PMS symptoms, like I said, are not normal. You don't have to deal with the irritability, the mood changes. You may notice a little bit more food cravings, but having excessive symptoms before your period isn't normal. And then breast tenderness can be a sign of iron or of progesterone and estrogen imbalance, whether it's too high of estrogen or too low of progesterone. And headaches and migraines, anxiety and depression, brain fog, insomnia, weight gain, low libido, bloating or water retention, and then hair loss and hair thinning is a really big sign of hormonal imbalance as well. And then acne can be either from estrogen or testosterone. And then any conditions that have been diagnosed, like endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, or ovarian cysts, you'll want to investigate the root cause of those things and look at your hormones a little bit deeper to figure out what's going on. All right, now let's talk a little bit of some of the natural ways that you can help support your hormones going forward from today. Four big things that I really look at is making sure that you are stopping exposure to all chemicals. So these two are really big right here. So alcohol and smoking. Alcohol hijacks your liver, and it's going to be focused more on breaking down the alcohol than breaking down and excreting some of your estrogen that needs to go through detoxification in order to leave your body. So you'll want to, especially if you're trying to work on balancing your hormones, you'll want to abstain and not drink any alcohol. And then smoking just puts such a big burden on your whole body. It's not cool anymore, so, and neither is vaping. So you'll want to make sure that you're taking the steps in order to quit if that's something that you're doing. These are both really big toxins that make it a lot harder for your body to focus on what really matters, and it's your hormones and the other toxins that we come into contact every day that we have no control over. And then another really big one is exposure to xenoestrogens. And so these are things that mimic estrogen in our body. There are things like plastics, parabens, phthalates. And so there have been studies around all of these, and that they show that things like BPA and BPS, which are found in plastic, can actually bind to estrogen receptors in the body, and it mimics estrogen activity. And then it comes up as an estrogen dominance picture where you're feeling like you're really feeling like crap. You're having more acne. You have symptoms of heavy periods. You are having painful periods, and the list goes on. So you'll want to limit exposure to those. And so you can start looking at some of your personal care products and making some changes in regards to those, because our makeup and our personal care products like shampoo, conditioner, body soap, face wash can all contain parabens and phthalates, and you'll want to take a look at some of those. There's a few different apps that you can look at the ingredients for your products, whether it's Think Dirty or Yuka. They tell you a lot, they dive into the ingredients in your products and tell you how they impact your health. And then plastic. So I always recommend not drinking from plastic water bottles. If you're using plastic, don't heat it up, don't put it in the microwave, don't put hot food in it, and then try to switch to glass Tupperware containers if possible. And then you'll really want to address stress. So chronic stress takes away some of the building blocks to your hormones, and it produces cortisol and epinephrine instead of your sex hormones, and it's taking away the building blocks to a healthy female reproductive system. And then you'll really want to improve your blood sugar balance. Running on iced coffee, skipping meals, this is a recipe for disaster when it comes to your hormones. And you'll want to make sure that you're eating balanced meals, you're not skipping meals. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a few slides. We talked a little bit about stress in the last slide. So HPA axis, this is the main area of stress, and this is something that you're going to want to work on if you're feeling like you're constantly stressed. And so this axis right here is just a hormone feedback release, and it's the main function of it is to help with the stress response in the body. So it's going to help in times of stress to promote the release of cortisol. And then there's a ton of chain reactions that happen in the brain to release all of this. But if we're constantly feeling like, if we're constantly stressed and we're under chronic stress where we have stress from school, we have stress just from our job, sleep deprivation, if we have dysfunctions in our circadian rhythm, if we're not eating enough, if we have nutritional deficiencies, this all impacts this feedback system right here, and it's going to pump out more of our stress hormones. So we find ourselves with constantly racing thoughts, worrying and obsessing over everything, feeling like we can't get anything done. We have low energy, and then even a little bit more belly fat can be an indication of this too, because cortisol really helps to support fat storage, and this can be an indication of that as well. And so it can cause so many different symptoms, whether it be imbalance of blood sugar, because it's stimulating the release of sugar from our liver and then increasing all of that sugar, causing more inflammation in our body, or it's impacting our hormones. And so there's a few different things that you can do to help improve your HPA axis function. And we're going to get into some of that too. It's really important to help calm the mind and practice techniques that help to promote a positive mental attitude, whether you're doing gratitude journals, or you can improve parasympathetic tone through contrast showers or cold immersion baths. And then also another favorite of mine is alternate nostril breathing. And then using better relaxation techniques, whether it be yoga, Pilates, or just meditation in general. And then you'll want to practice regular exercise and making sure that you're eating a balanced diet with regular meals. So exercise allows for adaptation for the nervous system to effectively address your stress. And so you'll want to make sure that you're not overdoing it with exercise. Constantly doing HIIT workouts can cause more stress to your body. So make sure that you're giving your body breaks and you're doing things that are benefiting your body rather than putting more stress on it. And anxiety and depression can also come with this HPA axis dysfunction, and exercise releases some of those good feel hormones called endorphins that will help with some of that anxiety and depression. And then we have our adaptogenic herbs, which help increase our resistance to stress. It restores vitality, it increases energy, it helps with mental and physical performance, and it helps with our body's reaction to stress. So adaptogenic herbs is actually something that got many of me and my classmates through medical school. And so they're really helpful at preventing some of that burnout. But it's important to remember that you'll want to address the cause of the stress, even if you're taking adaptogenic herbs, because while it helps to support your adrenal glands and helps to reduce some of that cortisol release and excessive stress on your body, it's not addressing the root cause, and you're going to keep going through that cycle of dysfunction and excessive cortisol release if you don't address that stress. And so one of my favorites for that is called HPA Adapt by Integrative Therapeutics. This contains herbs like ashwagandha, ginseng, and rhodiola that are really great at helping your body adapt. And another thing that I didn't mention, adaptogens are called adaptogens because they're helping your body adapt to stress. So I think that's a pretty cool play on the name. And then I mentioned blood sugar before, and it's really important to help support blood sugar for happy and healthy hormones, because inflammation from things like diet, like inflammatory vegetable oils, a lot of carbs or sugary foods, stress, smoking, alcohol, your environment, and unhealthy gut can really impair the ability for insulin to do its job. So it's impairing that ability to bring sugar into the cells and reduce that high blood sugar outside of the cell. And so when we're not able to bring that sugar into the cell, the body is going to stimulate the pancreas and be like, hey, we need more insulin because all of this sugar is out here and it's not going anywhere. So more insulin is going to be released. And then the way that this impacts your hormones is that when insulin's released, it actually goes and it stimulates the ovaries, and it causes them to release more testosterone. And when we have higher testosterone as women, we're going to see more hair growth in areas that we do not want hair growth. So we're going to see more on our chest. We're going to see more on our face, which is no fun. And then we're going to have more acne, and then we're going to be a little bit more irritable when we have higher testosterone levels. And then on top of that, the testosterone can be converted into estrogen, and then your estrogen levels can increase, and this can have symptoms of estrogen dominance. So on top of all that acne, hair growth, and irritability, you're going to have more PMS, you're going to have heavy periods, you're going to have anxiety, you're going to have painful periods, so more cramping, and low libido, which is no fun either, because I know I said when estrogen is higher, you're going to feel a little bit more sexy and like you are going to have a higher libido, but when it's too high in relation to progesterone too, then it's going to be, you're not going to have as much of a libido. So this is really important to address. And so these are some of my tips in making sure that you're supporting your blood sugar. You'll want to make sure that you're eating 3 meals a day. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's always been drilled in many people that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And that was said for a reason. So Food nourishes your body, it nourishes your hormones, and it provides the building blocks to help stimulate the production of other hormones. And that has a really big influence on your general hormone levels and the way that your cycle is regulating. So, if you're skipping breakfast, you're going to head straight into a higher cortisol spike, especially if you are drinking coffee before your breakfast. And then this is going to take away the building blocks to your hormones. And it's putting your body in more stress and it's triggering that HPA axis dysfunction. And so you'll want to make sure that you're not skipping those meals, and those meals that you are eating are balanced. So you'll want a high protein, high fat meal with some fiber and more complex carbs instead of simple carbohydrates. Another really great tip at helping support blood sugar is using bitter herbs or bitter tinctures before meals. One of my favorite bitter tinctures is from Wise Women Herbals. It's called Bitter Tonics. But you also can have a plate full of arugula with olive oil and balsamic vinegar that can help stimulate that bitter complex and release digestive enzymes and help support your blood sugar that way. And then if you're going to have more simple carbs, so the high glycemic foods, you'll want to have 1 to 2 tablespoons of vinegar before those foods. So food like white rice, white or whole bread, chips, potatoes, crackers, pasta. You can just take a little shot of apple cider vinegar before your meals, and this will help decrease that spike and that you'll get in your blood sugar from those high glycemic foods. Another one of my favorites is walking in that 2-hour time frame of meals. So walking either before or after a meal, it really helps to support your blood sugar in a way that it brings the sugar from your blood into your muscles, and your muscles end up using that as fuel. So that's a really great way at helping support your blood sugar. And then magnesium supplementation is really great as well. It helps to lower the blood sugar and increase insulin sensitivity, which insulin is the hormone that helps get blood sugar into the cells. And of course, high fiber foods, like I said, this is a great list of some high fiber foods. And if you are interested, seed cycling is a really great way at helping support your hormones as well. And so chia seeds and flax seeds are a really great way, an alternative at balancing your hormones. You just alternate these in the first and the second half of your cycle. And then pumpkin seeds as well. And then there's actually fiber in avocados, carrots, and broccoli. So just making sure that you're being mindful of the amount of fiber that you're eating. And of course, my favorite thing is digestive health, and you can't have healthy hormones if you do not have a healthy gut and a happy gut. So making sure that you are having at least 1 poop a day to help eliminate and flush out those toxins, and investigating the root cause of either having especially if you are more constipated, because you're not going to be able to flush out some of those toxins that your liver is working so hard to get out, and one of those things being estrogen. You'll want to reduce the inflammation in your gut, because an inflamed gut doesn't let nutrients in, and we need nutrients in order to build build our hormones. And then making sure that your gut flora is balanced and that you are improving the binding and elimination of estrogen. And these go hand in hand, because our gut flora is a part of our estrobolome, which is a collection of bacteria in the gut that is capable of metabolizing and modulating the body's circulating estrogen. So it helps get estrogen out of our body. And if there's too much bacteria there, it creates too much of this enzyme. And when there's too much, it actually puts estrogen back into our blood circulation, back into our body. So looking at your gut microbiome is actually so important at making sure that that your microbiome and your hormones are working proper, are balanced. So you'll want to make sure that if there's too much, that you're working on sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But you want to make sure that if there's too much bacteria and there's more of this enzyme that can be found through stool testing, that you are taking steps in order to reduce that. And so that's a really big part of how our gut health and our hormone health are interconnected. All right, and then this is our last slide. If you want to dive deeper into any of these topics that we talked about, these are 4 of my favorite books that I have learned a lot from, about fertility, about our periods, about our cycles, our hormones, and everything. So whether you have been on the pill or not, or you're trying to get pregnant or not, all of these books have really great information on our cycles. So Dr. Jolene Brighton is another naturopathic doctor that helps you get off the pill and talks to you about all of the different symptoms that can pop up when you're trying to get off the pill. And so I really like this book. Even if you're not getting off the pill, it's very informative and it really explains everything so well. This really helps you at learning more about your cycles. This is a really great book, even if you're not trying to get pregnant and you're just trying to get to know your body a little bit more. This one, especially if you have symptoms that your period that come up that are a little bit off for you, or you're experiencing some of those symptoms that we talked about in the previous slides, this is very helpful. And then this book, if you've ever been on birth control, I highly recommend reading it, even if you're not on birth control now, because it's very eye-opening and there's so much good information in there that has to do with our hormones and how our body reacted to when we were on birth control. And I just thought it was really, really cool. So if you're wanting to dive deeper, all of these books are a really great resource to learn a little bit more. I just want to thank you all for being here so much. I loved this masterclass. I had so much fun putting it all together and giving it all this information to all of you. And so I also wanted to relate to you that if you wanted to work together and work on improving your periods, if you had any of those symptoms that came up for you that weren't normal and you want to work on that, I do offer online and in-person visits for those of you who are in Connecticut. We can work together and get you on the track to better periods, regular symptom-free cycles. And so for everyone that attended and signed up for this masterclass, you get access to my healthy hormone package, which gets you $145 off of this package. That includes 3 visits with me, comprehensive hormone testing. It's called the Dutch test. And so it dives deep into all of those, all the main hormones of your period and of your cycle. It looks at cortisol levels, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and all of the metabolites along with all of those. And then you get a comprehensive treatment plan and 20% off of all supplements from my online dispensary. So I just want to thank you all for being here. This was such a great masterclass. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And let's see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you. What was that? The bitters tonic that you said?
Bitters tonic by Wise Woman Herbals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.